Hello, and welcome to episode 303 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. My name's Neville Bounds. It's just gone 7 o'clock on Friday, the 31st of January here in the UK, and hope everybody is well. And also in the PTUK studio is young Matt.
Oh, that's a long time since I've been called that. Thanks for that. I can't remember the last time I was called Nev. Hello, Nev. How are you?
Not bad, thank you. Not too bad. We've got we don't only the two of us tonight, although we've got Armando sort of virtually, who's going to make an appearance later on. Carlos is doing one of his gigs, apparently.
He is, yes.
So
he's busy DJing.
That's
DJing, absolutely. Yeah, so it's just you and me tonight, Nev.
Yeah. No, that's good.
That'd be nice.
It's been an interesting week or so. I've been at our company HQ in Portland, Oregon, on the West Coast, which was really good, really interesting.
So come on then. How long did it take you to get there?
Well, it's a good 9.25 hours to Seattle, and then about another 55 minutes on a turboprop, what was it, Q400-8, or the Crash 8, as we call it.
Right, okay.
And, well, frankly, coming back on that was pretty ropey, I've got to say. That was
really?
Much turbulence coming back to Seattle on that. But that was good. But it's still a long way. But, of course...
It hasn't got any shorter.
No, and there was, seat shaming and etiquette going on as well. So I'm sat down in my seat. It's all going terribly well.
Yes.
And this gentleman sits down next to me, so that's okay. So I'm just on the right hand side of the aircraft. There's two seats there. And he says, "Oh, would you mind if moving to somewhere else? Because my wife wants to sit next to me." And I said, "Well, where's she sitting then?" Expecting her to be on a nice window seat. Or no, she's right in the middle of a four. In the middle of the aircraft. Right. I said, I'm terribly sorry. No. I'm not going to move because that looks like a nightmare to me. And then somebody else gets on the aircraft. If he moves over here, and because she wants to sit next to him, and then it just goes on and on and on. And this is going on for 20 minutes as we're trying to push off the gate, coming back to Heathrow from Seattle. Eventually, the cabin services director intervenes and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to go. Would you please sit down?
Stop mucking about." Oh my God. Goodness.
But these things happen, don't they? But why is it always me? Perhaps I've just got that.
I think the first problem here, Nev, is the fact that you on first glance you seem like a relatively pleasant and approachable gentleman. I think that's maybe where you're going wrong. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Of course, soon they learn the error of their ways, but on initial inspection, all is well.
But it was all right. That was all fine. So that was good. And how was your week, Matt?
Yeah, no, very quiet actually. It's not a lot on this time of year, obviously, because it's cold and wet outside, frankly. So not a lot of people bother going anywhere. Just sort of swimming contracts and things. It's but I had a bit of fun today. Mother successfully managed to lock the keys in her car, which I don't even know to begin to know where to deal with that one. So I don't know.
See, in the old days, you'd just get a coat hanger, wouldn't you? And,
absolutely.
Bend it out and feed it through the door and then up with the lock. But that's all changed now, hasn't it?
No, absolutely, yes.
Not that I've ever broken into a car.
No, of course not. You're not speaking from experience. More's the pity, to be honest with you, Nev, because I could be I'm in a weird situation where I'd be really quite keen to have some kind of criminal visit me in order to sort of gain access to the car. I am giving serious consideration to maybe breaking one of the windows. I don't really know what is the best thing to do, really. I don't know whether it's going to be easy to get a window and change that, or whether it's it's like I've had two quotes so far, one which was 170 quid for a locksmith to come out and solve it. So if you are listening to this and have any bright ideas, do please feel free to chime in with some ideas.
Well, maybe you could get your address live on the air.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, absolutely. Come help yourself. Please do. I mean, it's got Mum's handbag in the car and everything at the moment. It's literally got everything. Also, on the plus side, it's got it's got a trolley full of very tasty pies that was supposed to be going to market. So yes, I'm more worried about those. I want those to be retrieved, which is the way forward. But do feel free to get in touch with the show while we're live. So the WhatsApp number is +44 757 22 49166. That is +44 757 22 49166. Email is podcast@planetalkinguk.com, and obviously search for social media by using the tag Plane Talking UK. And while we're live, you can get in touch. As I say, if you've got any advice about how to get into my mum's car, I'd be eternally grateful. Several people in the chat room, I'm pleased to say now. We've got Richard Adams, Owen Shimizu, James Russell, and the main man Marker. He's just arrived. A little while ago, there was Stephen Ivy as well. Quite a chat room today. I think everybody's busy, I think, today, isn't it? It's because you know what it is? It's because January's now come to an end and everybody's been paid. I think that's what it is. Everybody's
it's a great relief as well. Doesn't January feel a terribly long month?
It does. It feels like it's gone on for about 9 weeks. I've got to be honest. Oh my goodness. But never mind. Anyway, enough of this shenanigans. Shall we get on and do some aviation news, shall we?
Let's do that. Yes.
Here we go. Now, the one thing I forgot to ask is who's going to go first? I think we've got an introduction from Armando, I think, haven't we?
Yes, so why don't we play that first of all, then?
Yes, okay.
Apologize for not being on the show this week. Originally, I was supposed to be able to, but I got put on a trip at the last minute. So I am actually flying at the exact same time that this show is recording. But we had a lot of news this week, so I still wanted to get some stories in. And this first one is from the Dallas Morning News. Hundreds of American Airlines pilots have rallied at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport on Wednesday in their first public demonstration against the carrier after a year of negotiations that has failed to yield a new contract. Many of their signs read, "Are you frustrated with American Airlines? So are we." And pilots and passengers are in it together. Leaders of the Allied Pilots Association, which represents about 14,000 pilots at the Fort Worth-based airline, say that company negotiators have moved too slowly, even though both sides had a soft deadline to reach a deal by the beginning of 2020, when the old contract was amendable. So the line of pilots dressed in full uniform stretched the entire sidewalk in front of Terminal D. They were joined by representatives for Americans, flight attendants, and maintenance workers, as well as pilots from United Airlines and Delta Airlines. Pilot union members have been wearing lanyards with the phrase, "It's time." They've also posted videos to YouTube highlighting what they say is unfair scheduling and poor operational performance at American Airlines that they say puts unfair pressure on pilots and other employees. One pilot with American that's been there 6 years said that pilots want to send a message to the American CEO, Doug Parker, and other leaders that a lack of a contract and poor operating performance is starting to wear on the pilots. She said they want reliability. A lot of our goals are the same as the company. In their first contract negotiation in 5 years, pilots are using American's high delay and cancellation rate from 2019 to put public pressure on the airline, along with financial results and profit-sharing programs that generally lag competitors at Atlanta-based Delta Airlines and Dallas-based Southwest Airlines. Our proposals address our pilots' needs and also take into account the needs of American Airlines, its passengers, and its investors, said APA President Captain Eric Ferguson. Quote, "Simply put, what we propose is exactly what American Airlines needs. We stand at a unique fork in the road during these negotiations that presents management with a rare opportunity to transform this airline for the better or not," end quote. American Airlines leaders have said that they are optimistic about getting a new deal soon. They said that they look forward to continuing to negotiate with the APA and will return to the negotiating table early in February. They remain committed to delivering improvements in compensation and quality of life for American Airlines pilots. Pilots, on the other hand, are saying that American Airlines is running an inefficient operation that leaves too many crew members on standby. Pilots are paid higher rates when they are flying than when they are on reserve. They say that delays and cancellations result not only in lower pay, but longer hours. So despite negotiating for a year, the pilots union said that American Airlines spent much of 2019 requesting information instead of making any proposals. The company and the pilots didn't have a hard deadline to come to a new agreement because airline contracts don't expire under federal law. So those same federal laws also prohibit airline workers from striking unless they receive approval from a federal board. So in the past, that's led some unions to take extraordinary measures to show displeasure. American Airlines pilots engaged in a coordinated sick out in 1999 that landed the union in legal trouble. American Airlines and Southwest Airlines also sued their respective mechanics unions last year over alleged work slowdowns in the middle of contract negotiations. Southwest came to a deal with its mechanics in March, while American Airlines got a court order prohibiting any slowdowns, even though it had yet to reach a contract with its 30,000 mechanics and fleet maintenance workers. So American Airlines is also in negotiations with its flight attendants, who started talking about a year ago for a new deal also. Lori Bassani, the president of the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, which represents approximately 25,000 flight attendants at American, said the union is discussing holding its own rallies as negotiations continues. So,
I mean, I must admit, I had no idea that this sort of story seems to have slipped, sort of passed me by, to be honest with you. But I had no idea so many people were unhappy. Although, to be fair, Dave Abbey in the chat room has just said it's not necessarily that everyone's unhappy; it's just the loud ones, which is probably a good point.
True, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I genuinely had no idea. I mean, what are your thoughts, Nev?
It's sort of news that we don't hear about so much in Europe, isn't it?
No.
With that sort of thing, especially if there's major American airlines going through things. But yes, I think that story's been brewing for a while. I think as well.
Okay. I mean, the only time we seem to hear the word strikes usually involves the French air traffic controllers, but
yes, that's something. What is it? Someone said to me the other day the things that are certainties in life is paying taxes, death, and French ATCs.
Yeah, absolutely, quite right. Yeah, absolutely, difficult to disagree. The first story Armando has done for us, so we'll crack on with that.
So by the time this show airs, everyone will have most likely heard of the helicopter crash in California that killed basketball star Kobe Bryant. There is a lot of speculation out there in the internet. There's a lot of finger pointing already. I'll caveat this one by saying that it is incredibly important to let the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, do their thing, do what they do, come up with a preliminary report as well as a full report that usually takes between 12 and 18 months, as they said in their press conference. But this article from ABC News talks about a chilling home security video that has surfaced that captured the sound of the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and his daughter, as well as 7 others, en route to a basketball game. So the footage was taken by a Google Nest camera on a home near the crash site in Calabasas, California, and it actually contains the audio of the Sikorsky S-76 aircraft as it made a rapid descent and crashed into a mountainside in dense fog last Sunday. Audio, which was obtained by ABC News, includes what is believed to be the aircraft hitting the mountain, which is then followed by eerie silence. So the video came from the home of Miss Rana Levitt, who told ABC that the camera was near her front door. Levitt said that she turned the video over to the National Transportation Safety Board investigators who are analyzing the footage as part of their investigation to determine what caused the crash. Levitt said that the helicopter, owned by Island Express and leased by Bryant, passed over her house in LA County and appeared to make a U-turn before it crashed at a high speed into the mountainside. Bryant and his daughter were headed to a youth basketball game at his Mamba Sports Academy in Thousand Oaks, as well as others connected to the basketball program. On Thursday, the LA County medical examiner said the cause of death was consistent with that which is found in an accident like this one. So in addition to Bryant and his daughter, the coroner's office also confirmed the identities of the 7 other individuals on board. Baseball coach John Altobelli and his wife Carrie, their daughter Alyssa, girls basketball coach Christina Mauser, Sarah Chester, and her daughter Peyton Chester, as well as the pilot Ara Zobayan. All of the passengers are believed to have died instantly when the helicopter crashed northwest of LA. So the lead NTSB investigator said the helicopter, which was not equipped with terrain avoidance warning system or TAWS, which could have alerted the pilot that he was flying too close to the mountains. She said that a 2004 crash of a Sikorsky S-76 in Texas prompted the NTSB to recommend to the FAA that all existing and new U.S. registered turbine power rotorcraft certified for 6 or more passengers be equipped with a TAWS system. However, she said they did not implement that recommendation. Certainly, TAWS could have helped to provide information to the pilot on what terrain he was flying in. But she did add that it remains uncertain whether a warning system would have prevented the crash. So current FAA regulations mandate TAWS installations only in helicopters that conduct air ambulance operations. The helicopter containing the Bryants took off from John Wayne Airport near their home in Orange County before heading towards Thousand Oaks. During the flight, the pilot radioed the air traffic control tower at Burbank Airport to request permission to fly under special visual flight rules, or special VFR. Now, the helicopter circled over Glendale for several minutes, waiting for instructions for Burbank before it was allowed to fly visually through their airspace. Now, the NTSB said this is very common. It's not out of the ordinary. And I did listen to the recording, the ATC recording, and the only reason they held there was because there was IFR departures and arrivals coming into Burbank. So they had to hold, which is entirely normal. In the last moments of this flight, the helicopter climbed to 2,300 feet in an attempt to fly out of a cloud layer, and then suddenly made a rapid descent, said the NTSB. The descent rate for the helicopter was over 2,000 feet per minute, so they know that it was a high energy impact crash, as they said, and the helicopter was in a descending left bank. There was no evidence that the helicopter broke apart before hitting the mountainside. The NTSB said that all the significant components of the aircraft were located at that crash site. So there was, like I said, a lot of speculation and a lot of armchair quarterbacking about this mishap. Now, I did find one other article from Plane and Pilot magazine that kind of came up with 3 theories, with the first theory being a loss of situational awareness, where the pilot flew into the clouds, he lost his way and crashed while trying to avoid terrain, figure things out. So this is a common, unfortunately, type of mishap. If this was the cause, the helicopter was certified for instrument flight. The pilot was also certified for instrument flight. However, I read somewhere else that the company prohibits pilots and aircraft from filing instrument flight plans and flying under those rules. So the second theory is a loss of control, where the pilot lost spatial awareness and then lost control of the helicopter. This is, probably going to be a true fact, or at least a contributing factor, probably related to the first theory. and then the third theory being a stall, that the pilot stalled the helicopter, realizing he was too low. He could have attempted to climb too fast, too soon. It could have gone into what's called a rotor stall, in which the rotor RPM gets too low to support the weight of the helicopter, which then falls to the earth. In helicopters, an RPM or rotor stall is difficult, if not impossible, to recover from. So for this one, we'll just have to, again, let the NTSB do what it is that they do, and we'll continue to update everybody on the story.
I mean, it's an awful story, isn't it? It's so sad, isn't it? There's obviously, I mean, there's one famous person who was on it and his daughter, and of course there were, 7 other people also on that craft at the time. As you say, I guess it's one of those we need to wait for the NTSB to do their job, and as Armando says there, and sort of, I suppose, get an update.
Terrible, absolutely terrible. And I think that the these situations where you're flying in very high terrain, you've just got to be absolutely. You need to know where you are.
Absolutely, yeah.
Point really, but until the NTSB make their report, there's not much more we can say.
It's just speculation, isn't it? At the end of the day, until we know more. I will just mention. I hope Jonathan doesn't mind me saying in here, but obviously many of the people who listen to the show will remember that there was an awful accident on the M25. I think it was New Year's Eve, wasn't it? And as I say, Jonathan Warner's actually just said, I attended my wife's cousin's funeral yesterday. He was 23, one of the 3 BA crew who died in the car accident on New Year's Eve. And as I say, lots of love for the family there in the chat room. He was saying whilst it was very sad, it was also a beautiful event. Around about 300 people attended, and around 80 were BA crew in uniform, which I think is lovely, isn't it? To sort of show proper respect.
It was actually right next. It was on the A4, I think.
Oh, was it? My apologies.
The perimeter road around Heathrow, but
okay.
Nonetheless, I think the crew had just come off their shift, from what I read. And they were going to a party or going home. So yeah.
I mean, there's never a good time for something like that to happen, is there? But especially sort of post Christmas and New Year, it suddenly becomes a bit of an unwanted marker, doesn't it? Really, for something like that. Anyway, we'll move on to the next story. This is another website that I've not seen before. It's ttgmedia.com. Carlos, where do you find these sites? Anyway, it's travel industry news, which is interesting. Story number 2 is Ryanair, as always, and they warn of further job cuts and base closures due to the 737 MAX delay. Oh, good. Ryanair has warned it may have to make further job cuts and close more bases due to the ongoing grounding of Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. So the Irish budget carrier has 135 MAXs on order, but was forced last year to reduce planned capacity growth by 4% due to the MAX grounding. Boeing has since said that the MAX may not return to service now until mid-2020. In a memo to staff, Chief Executive Eddie Wilson said Ryanair had hoped to have the 10 MAXs operational by June 2020. However, this has been forced to remove these flights from its schedule due to the ongoing grounding. Wilson added that based on Boeing's estimate, Ryanair did not expect to start taking deliveries of its MAXs until the autumn. We cannot rule out further base cuts and closures, said Wilson. We will do our best to avoid any more base closures, but this will mean eliminating at least 10 aircraft from existing bases, so further pilot and cabin crew jobs losses cannot be ruled out. Wilson added that the airline would aim to advise all bases by early February what further cuts or closures will be required, adding they would be as a direct result of the MAX delays. Meanwhile, Ryanair has inked a 4-year labour agreement with Irish pilots union Forza, which it said would deliver a new pay structure and roster. So, I mean, this MAX story is just going to keep running and running, isn't it? I think until it's been solved.
Yes, and it's far from over. And I think, you might say, well, why don't they just go and lease lease some aircraft
absolutely
crew? But I would imagine with the Ryanair financial model as it is,
Yeah.
they probably doesn't allow for that kind of thing.
No, indeed. I mean, this is
their own gear. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's. I mean, I'm beginning to think: is there ever going to be an end to this? I mean, it's.
I think there will be. It's just that they are quite rightly not taking any chances whatsoever.
No,
I mean,
no.
they cannot afford to. They cannot afford to have another hull loss. They cannot afford to have any technical problems of the sort that they have encountered. And it's all about the pilot training at the moment and trying to find simulators around the world that will do that for them. So that's going to delay things a bit. But there is absolutely no point, irrespective of the financial penalty, there is no point in putting anything back into the air until they have certified it in the US, and then EASA has certified it in Europe. So,
And of course, last week they were celebrating the fact that the 777X was launched, wasn't it? I think it launched because we were following it, weren't we, to start off with? But I don't think it actually hit the air till the Saturday, did it? In the end, I think it did its maiden flight on the Saturday.
That's right.
But so it's they're still churning out aircraft, I suppose, and new aircraft are being certified. So it's
it is very unfortunate, isn't it? It's talk about was it all the holes in the Swiss cheese lining up for, but anything that could go wrong at Boeing has gone wrong, and it's just a very, very unfortunate phase. But you've got to remember that back in 1969, when they launched the 747, it almost bankrupted the company.
Really.
Because of the high cost of production and the low uptake. So, Boeing have been here before. I'm not saying it's anywhere near that stage, but, we are talking about highly advanced aircraft with, a lot of technical features which they have to iron out properly, don't they? So,
so they've been here before. If any airframe manufacturer can dig themselves out of this hole, it is probably Boeing, isn't it?
Well, they've got a lot of resource, and of course they've got a lot of very clever people there as well, and all the suppliers to Boeing as well. So they've got all the right people to do it, but they just cannot afford
another screw up essentially.
To have. Well, also, even if they get it as far as the certification bit, if they get to the point where the FAA don't certify it, then they're not quite back to the drawing board. But it's a big problem, of course. And as the article said, Ryanair obviously were banking on the MAX for the summer period, spring and summer period, and that's looking very much in doubt at the moment.
Yeah.
So it just goes on, doesn't it? But they're doing the right thing, though. They have to.
Yeah, I mean, I've said on countless occasions, it's like one of those people saying, "Oh, when that ends up in the air, I don't want to be on a passenger on it." And I'm thinking, well, actually, no. Weirdly, I would be much more comfortable in that aircraft because all the pilots will be absolutely A1 to any alterations that have been made to it. I mean, as you say, they cannot afford for this to go wrong again, can they? So when they do return to service these things, I mean, confidence ought to be really high in it. I mean, and I'm a nervous flyer, I'm the first to admit that, and yet weirdly I'm thinking, do you know what, I'd probably take a MAX over most aircraft when it finally goes back in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the next story is on the IB Times. And this is interesting if you're a British Airways customer. It says, clean seats aboard British Airways assured only to VIP passengers. Not all British Airways customers are guaranteed a clean seat on board their aircraft. The new policy ensures that certain VIP passengers enjoy the benefit of getting a clean seat for their flight. Random checks carried out by BA to ensure aircraft cleanliness means that the chances of regular passengers encountering an unclean seat are very high. To reduce wait time and flight delays, BA cut down the cleaning time. The airline conducts random checks of aircraft to see if the aircraft is clean or not. The cabin crew on board the flight is expected to coax passengers to hand over their in-flight trash before the flight lands. Even though passengers may be handing over empty packets to the cabin crew, food particles collect in the seats, and the seats are then occupied by passengers who assume that the airline has taken the step of cleaning their seats. In February 2019, last year, the airline ran a test to see if cutting down cleaning time reduced wait time. The Telegraph had reported that a cleaning crew did clear and rearrange the cabin, but it was unclear that they had cleaned the seats, if they had cleaned the seats. But according to The Sun, the airline informed its staff on an online forum about the new seat cleaning policy. As per the new rules, all seats to be occupied by Premier and Gold guests are to be cleaned prior to their flights. Passengers who are Premier or Gold guests can rest assured to get a clean seat irrespective of seating class. First class passengers and luxury club suite passengers will not get the service that the passengers on the Premier and Gold guest list are entitled to. Passengers who are on the VIP list are usually frequent flyers or those who book flights for big companies. These flyers are considered to be more important than other passengers. Do they mean me?
No, but surely you are the elite.
Cabin crew complained about the new policy, stating that it's important to keep the entire flight hygienic instead of just ensuring fresh seats for certain passengers. The airline claimed that checking process in place ensured that all customers get unsoiled seats.
Oh,
that's not a word I like the sound of.
No,
it's
not when one's parking one's posterior. That's not really something you want to hear, is it? That's
right.
That's pretty horrendous.
You would have thought. I don't know. I just assumed that the whole plane was clean. But
I mean,
there's a possibility that in some situations it isn't.
I mean, I haven't had the luxury that you have, Nev. I'll be brutally honest. I mean, what little flying I have done has usually involved a Ryanair aircraft of some description. And to be fair, if you're on the first flight of the day, the aircraft is very clean when you get on. It's fully stocked. It's got every beverage and food item you could possibly imagine. But other than a quick sort of courtesy tidy, they don't really interfere with it really until it comes back to base again for cleaning. So
the thing is, of course, the turnaround time, especially on these short sectors.
Absolutely.
I mean, even on the longer sectors. So the aircraft that came in to collect us from Seattle last week was only on the ground, hour and a half,
really,
something like that, before we got on it. And so that was refueled, recatered, cleaned. So there's only so much you can do in that relatively short space of time.
Well, again, and using Ryanair as an example, of course, the harsh reality is obviously their turnaround times are 20, 30 minutes at the end of the day. I mean, they basically land, offload passengers, quickly pick up all the magazines and put everything back in the pockets, and then more passengers go on and off they go, either back to its originating base or onto another sector before returning to its originating base. Yeah. So, it's I don't know. I suspect it's something we're going to see more and more of. It won't just be BA, I think, where they're having these problems. We'll move on to the next story, if that's all right, sir. We'll go to Simple Flying for this story, and the headline is the A320neo versus the 737 MAX. What will Alaska Airlines order next? Well, I guess based on current wait times, if they've got any sense, they'll go with the A320neo. But anyway, Alaska Airlines is in need of a significant fleet refresh to replace its ex-Virgin America Airbus A319/A320s. But it has a dilemma whether to choose the Airbus A320neo or the Boeing 737 MAX. While Alaska Airlines isn't a big airline by American standards, it's pretty large compared to most airlines around the world. In total, Alaska Airlines operates an active fleet of 237 aircraft, 61 of which it inherited from Virgin America after it acquired the airline back in December 2016. The 61 ex-Virgin America aircraft now operated by Alaska Airlines are all Airbus A319-A320s, but this caused a bit of an issue for Alaska Airlines as it had previously operated a Boeing-only fleet. Now the fleet of ex-Virgin America Airbus A319-A320s are in need of replacement, specifically before 2024. But what should Alaska Airlines do now? So obviously the Boeing 737 MAX is one of the options, and Alaska Airlines has two options to move forward with its narrow-body fleet renewal. It wants to get a latest generation aircraft with a maximum fuel and efficiency cost. As reported by the Points Guy, Alaska Airlines Chief Financial Officer Shane Tackett highlighted the airline's motivations for a fleet refresh. We have an opportunity to replace 61 A319s and A320 aircraft with larger gauge, more efficient assets that would give us the ability to generate more revenue while lower lower unit costs. To generate more revenue while lower, you get the gist, he said during an earnings call earlier this week. The first option is the Boeing 737 MAX, which, as we are all aware, comes with a long list of drawbacks. That's a slight understatement. Alaska Airlines actually already has a sizable order for 32 of the Boeing 737 MAX on the books, but there's no real indication of when they might finally arrive. Many airlines have removed the Boeing 737 MAX from their schedules until the middle of this year, and the recertification process appears to be coming up against new hurdles regularly. As a result, another big new order for the type would be a significant gamble for Alaska Airlines because of the uncertainty surrounding the future of the Boeing 737 MAX. New orders for the type have dropped off a cliff. Alaska Airlines would be bucking an industry-wide trend of holding off on the new orders for the 737. On the other hand, new Boeing 737 MAX would likely be available at a significant discount if and when the type is recertified. So we'll move on to the A320neo. Alaska Airlines' second option is that aircraft, which would be a move away from its all-Boeing fleet. Although the airline has been operating Airbus types on lease, full-time Alaska Airline pilots and staff would have to go through significant retraining to fly the Airbus A320neo, but like the Boeing 737 MAX, Alaska Airlines technically already has a sizable order for the Airbus A320neo, which it took over from Virgin America after the acquisition deal. Unless it cancels its commitment to this order, Alaska Airlines will be taking delivery of 30 Airbus A320neos between 2022 and 2024. Ultimately, Alaska Airlines will have to weigh up the risk of further issues with the 737 MAX versus the inconvenience it would experience if it took on the Airbus A320neo. It's a tricky one, that, isn't it, really, I suppose?
Yeah. I mean, I was amazed when I flew out of Seattle and Portland last week. Obviously, that's two big hubs for Alaska Airlines. How many aircraft were on stands? They are a very big base. Both of the airports seem to be quite a big base. So they're obviously a big operator of these sort of medium range aircraft. So as Mike said in the chat room, they not doing that until 2022 and 2024. So hopefully all these MAX problems will be solved by then. If that's the route they decide to go now.
I believe the phrase that I use on a regular basis is fingers and toes all crossed with knots tied in anything else I can manage on a warm day. So yes, it's a brave move, certainly. I don't know. I don't know. I guess the betting man in me would say probably they might risk the A320, I guess. But anyway, we'll move on to the next story. That one is with Armando. Take it away.
This next story from the Herald Sun, an aging Iranian passenger airliner carrying 144 people crash landed on a runway and skidded onto a major highway next to an airport on Monday, the latest crash in the Islamic Republic, as U.S. sanctions bar it from parts or getting new aircraft. So authorities have said that 2 people suffered injuries in the hard landing of the McDonnell Douglas MD-83 flown by Caspian Airlines in a city that is oil-rich in southwest Khuzestan province. So the passengers, apparently in shock, calmly exited the aircraft with their carry-on baggage out of a door near the cockpit and another of the plane's overwings exits, according to a video from Iran's Civil Aviation Network News. Flight attendant was shouting at passengers to calmly walk away as another crew member joined her on the wing. We crashed, but we are unhurt, said one of the passengers, who was visibly shaking. The provincial airport director, Mohammed Reza Rezanian, said all of the passengers had been safely taken off the airplane, which had been flying from Tehran to northeast of Mashhad. The plane had 136 passengers and 8 crew members aboard. It seems that a tragedy was narrowly avoided. However, as images from the scene showed, the plane had ground to a halt not far from a populated area. The plane also missed traffic on a major highway linking Mashhad to Imam Khomeini Port. Iranian state television said the plane involved in Monday's crash came in harder than usual and lost its landing gear as it hit the tarmac. No landing gear could be seen in the pictures of the airplane after the crash, but it was not immediately clear if it failed to deploy or somehow collapsed as the jet hit the runway about 7:35 local time. Obviously, the accident is under investigation. Their article goes on with specific details and has some political leanings in here, as well as just a brief summary of the shoot down from earlier this month. So you can go over to the Herald Sun and go through to the show notes.
I mean, it's amazing, really, when you think nobody was seriously hurt with something like that, isn't it? I mean, it's a testament to how amazing these aircraft are, really, isn't it? I mean,
I don't know why the article goes on about the fact it was, the aircraft was 25 years old. There's plenty of 25, 26-year-old aircraft flying. And I can say this because there were no injuries, but at least they didn't have to get a shuttle to the downtown area. They just parked right there.
Quite. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one could argue that landing on the motorway essentially, gave easy access to, transport links and things like that. So, it's a difficult one. Everybody's sort of carrying all their cases off and stuff. I mean, we've all seen the pictures and stuff, obviously, earlier in the week. It's an amazing story, really.
Yeah, obviously, there was no fire or anything like that, so that obviously made a massive difference, didn't it? So, it's pretty unusual, actually, to see that amount of. Well, I mean, fortunately, there were no serious injuries or fatalities. Like
No, quite. Okay, we'll move on then. If we'll leave you with story number 6, shall we?
Yes, this is on the simpleflying.com, and the headline is, why did Airbus skip the A360 and A370 names? It's a question that I've always asked myself.
Yeah, absolutely. In the same way that they went from Windows 8, ditched 9 and went straight to 10. It's one of those, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Well, apparently Airbus began naming its aircraft with the Airbus 300, as we know. After this first attempt at a jetliner, it then moved to the A310 and the A320. The A320 would go on to be expanded into all of the variants we know and love. So that's the A318 to the Neos, right through to the A321 XLR, or maybe even the A322 in future. And then Airbus would scrap the A300 and A310 to build the A330 and A340 instead. However, from here it gets a little shaky, because in 2000 Airbus launched the A380, seemingly skipping over 3 different generations of Airbus aircraft. Then in 2015 they brought the A350 to the market to fill up the gap and replace the A340. So the question is, where is the Airbus A360 and A370? Well, there are 3 main theories as to why Airbus jumped ahead with the A380. The first is that the A380 carries double the passengers than the A340, so 650 versus 380, depending on the configuration, and thus Airbus wants to signify this in the name. Even looking at the 2 aircraft, you can see that the A380 is essentially a double-decker A340. The second theory is that because of China, in Chinese cultures, the number 8 is very auspicious and considered very lucky. Airbus, knowing that China would become the world's largest aviation market by 2024, wanted to break into it with their supermassive Peaceable mover, and therefore ensure that the aircraft was the 8th in the series. Additional support for this theory is found in the fact that Boeing called their own iteration of the next super large jet the Boeing 747-8 to try and beat Airbus to the Asian market. But we do know that the main reason Boeing called the latest 747 the Dash 8 was because it shares technology from the 787. One other possible theory is that Airbus didn't skip the A360 and A370, but they are still waiting to be filled. The A380 was expected to be so huge and be sold for the next 30 to 40 years that Airbus would be very unlikely to build a bigger aircraft. Thus, they jumped ahead to build something big and wanted to circle back to the A350, 60 and 70 when they had aircraft to fill in the capacity gap. So looking at the A350, we see this was somewhat true. The A350 carries more than the A330 and A340, and is the next step up the ladder towards the A380. Excuse me. The A360 may have been proposed back in 2006 to fill the gap between the A350 and the A380, just like the Boeing 777X-9 or 747-400, or perhaps a long-haul low-capacity aircraft like the Boeing 747SP. The Airbus A370, on the other hand, may have been proposed a small jet to fill in the 100-seat market segment. Airbus's move to acquire the A220 program has since filled that gap. So far, we know that Airbus has 3 empty slots, the A360, A370 and the A390, and we can't wait to see what they fill them with.
I mean,
it's not something which I consider every day of the week.
No, indeed. Although, as I say, it is an interesting one. Is that what, why do they sort of, they were running in sequence. Perhaps there is something to that A340 going to the A380 where it's essentially double the amount, as you say. But they could well, as it says in the story, they could well go back and use the 360 and 370 as the 380 was not the success that. Yeah. Perhaps everybody was hoping. As you say, it's economic times changing and things, it's you want it sort of super economical, I guess. I wonder if I could trouble you to take story 7 for me, please, sir, because there's lots of really nice photographs that I want to share with you. So
this is the on the dailymail.co.uk. And it says that the best airline innovations for 2020 have been revealed, and they include a coffee shop style cabin, Virgin Atlantic swanky soft lounge and economy seats that allow passengers to face each other. A total of 105 concepts are in the running for gongs at the prestigious Crystal Cabin Awards, which are dubbed the Oscars of aircraft cabin design. They were whittled down from a record number of submissions from 21 countries. Awards will be presented in March across 8 categories, and you can see some extraordinary looking designs.
I know, absolutely. These it's just amazing stuff.
Yeah, well, the categories are cabin concepts, cabin systems, greener cabin, health, safety and environment, in-flight entertainment and connectivity, materials and hardware, passenger comfort hardware, and the University Award and Visionary Concepts. Amongst the concepts in the running for an award are submissions that the judges say show potential for revolutionising cabin layouts. One of these is Dubai Aviation engineering project's retractable aircraft cabin, which will allow whole rooms from restaurants to spas to be inserted into the aircraft cabin during ground handling. The company says it developed the concept to capitalise on unutilised airline seating capacities to enable new ways of passenger engagement. The University of Cincinnati, meanwhile, has developed the idea of placing a long coffee table in the cabin. Explains with 4 passengers seated at each table, a coffee house cabin allows passengers to have the personal workspace during flight. For safety, during takeoff and landing, all seats rotate towards the front of the aircraft and table wings fold down and are secured. More incredible pictures there, I must say.
I mean, it's weird, isn't it? It looks very sort of, almost look like, it looks like you're in conference. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it does a bit, yeah. Well, also, it says that London-based Acumen's The Room also impressed. This is a luxurious business class seat it created for All Nippon Airways that the judges say combine modern Japanese style with the best in-class dimensions. Virgin Atlantic also gets a nod for the Loft, which was created for the airline's first A350-1000. It's an exclusive lounge and bar for premium class passengers. Economy cabin concepts that have caught the judges' eyes include the Hamburg-based Heinkel's Flex Lounge, which are groups of 4 seats that can be rotated so that passengers can face each other. And Adient has been praised for its idea to add an extension retraction mechanism to the seating row behind the partition, separating business class from economy to create a single large surface for parents and children to lie down together. When it comes to sustainable travel and making cabins greener, the judges say that the grey water reuse unit from Deal Aviation is a case in point. Instead of using precious drinking water, it uses water from hand washing in the basin to flush the toilet. The result is a saving up to 550 tonnes of CO2 per year for a single Boeing 787. Several entries also looked at wireless entertainment with the Flymingo Next concept from Moment, going beyond classic in-flight entertainment, say the judges. In addition to wireless streaming, the hardware integrates the Internet of Things technologies, IoT, for the crew, indicating, for example, seat occupancy and baggage locker use. Other submissions have taken the flight against the grey cabin wall. One of these is AERQ, a joint venture between LG and Lufthansa Technik, which aims to make the partitions between classes almost invisible. Instead of partition walls, transparent screens will show passenger information and offers from the airline. Other awards entries focused on sleep, such as Stelia's sleep care app for smartphones. The story goes on quite a bit here, but I think that they've got to the stage now where the classic aircraft layout is just, well, now they've experimented with suites and bars and all sorts of things. They now need to take it to a stage further. And I think that the amount of design input and ideas is fantastic in this, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be the way forward, hasn't it? I mean, it is surely the future, isn't it? Where we you sort of look into it's about making, I don't know, I suppose it's, sorry, I'm sort of jumbling my words here, but it's like, I guess it depends on what you're flying for, doesn't it? I mean, if, yes, like me, you're using it as essentially as a glorified bus, then you're sort of sort of the model that Ryanair uses is absolutely fine, because essentially you're going from A to B. It's a cheap way of getting to your holiday. But then there are times when, you crave these amazing things. And I love the idea of being able to go to a bar and have a drink while you're flying somewhere. I'd love the idea of being able to go to a restaurant sort of thing, sit down and have a bite to eat. I would love to go and attend a conference whilst in the air. I say the economy cabin one, actually, that's the thing that sort of blew my mind more than anything else. In fact, you're able to swing the seats around and up would come this sort of table that we've all sat at when we've been to conferences and things to sort of have a meeting. I mean, that's just, I don't know. Weirdly, I find that more appealing than anything else.
Creativity is the name of the game, isn't it? And of course, it's all about weight saving as well. So anything that the designers can do, the manufacturers can do to save some weight, then so much the better.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, we're going to move on to the next story now. This one is with Armando. Take it away, Armando.
This good news story from Yahoo Finance goes on to say how no one enjoys boarding an airplane. It's slow, it's inefficient, it's often undignified. And that's without even getting into the ethical quandary of so-called gate lice, the anxious passengers who cluster at the gate before their group is called. But at least one part of the process doesn't need to be disrupted when it comes to shunting slow-moving passengers to the front of the queue, such as those requiring assistance or with small children. Airlines have it exactly right. According to a new paper published by the American Physical Society by a team of Norwegian authors, shows that it's a resounding 28% more efficient to allow slower passengers to board first. This is a universal result, valid for any combination of the parameters that characterize the problem. So, airplane boarding might not seem the most obvious preoccupation for physicists, but inefficiencies in the current system, boarding by group from the rear of the airplane to the front, have resulted in a series of academic studies trying to solve the issue, perhaps inspired by researchers' own experience of the interminable wait to board. So meanwhile, practical tests, including on the television show Mythbusters, they've proven that almost anything would be better than the system currently in place. And I think we've done some stories in the past about that. Researchers had long suspected that it might be quickest to start with the slow-moving passengers, but the APS paper was a demonstration of that fact using some fairly sophisticated math. Astrophysicist Jason Hiram-Steffen, an assistant professor at the University of Nevada, told this news outlet. He gives the analogy of filling a jar with rocks and sand. If you put in the sand first, followed by the rocks, you can't fit it all into the same container. But if you start with the rocks, you can pour in the sand and it'll fill in all the gaps. Here, the slow boarding passengers are the rocks. while the quicker ones are like grains of sand trickling between them and filling the spaces. Though not involved in this particular paper, Stefan is no stranger to the problem of how to board passengers. For more than a year, he found himself consumed by it while mowing the lawn or getting ready in the morning. Eventually, in what he describes as an act of desperation, he sat down and solved the matter in a matter of weeks. I needed to either stop thinking about it and move on to something else or find a solution. And his work was eventually published in the Journal of Air Transport Management in 2008, with follow-ups from the American Journal of Physics. His own method, which many consider to be the most efficient, boards passengers in a series of waves, with the first passengers called to board seated in window seats 2 rows apart. So, for example, 30A, 28A, 26A, and so on. Then the same for the other side of the airplane, 30F, 28F, 26F. And this process continues with odd row window seats in either side, then the middle seats, then finally the aisle seats. So each person can sit down within moments of one another without getting in each other's way. In field tests, it proved to be almost twice as fast as conventional methods, and 20 to 30% faster than have a complete have at it, which is just entirely random boarding. Intuitively, you'd expect to board from back to front to be the fastest way to get passengers onto the plane, but in actual fact, anytime you want to speed up the boarding process, the only way to really do it is to have multiple people sitting down at the same time. So there you go. There's documented evidence that there are better methods out there, and hopefully somebody listens and implements it.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, your experience of passenger loading will be far superior to mine. I mean, what are your thoughts on this one, Nev?
It just takes so long. I mean,
yeah.
I think Lufthansa came up with a really good solution. This is quite a long time ago now, probably back in the 90s when we used to fly them quite a lot. They used to board from the back of the aircraft first, using the window seats first, then the center seats, and then the aisle seats. And that seemed to work quite well. But then now you've got all this business of group boarding and all the rest of it. And each airline does it slightly differently. And especially when you get the wrong people coming up from the wrong group, and then there's tutting going on and general displeasure, mainly by me.
Of course, absolutely. Certainly given the experience you had that you were telling us about at the start of the show. But exactly. It's one of those. I see we've got royalty in the chat room, by the way.
Captain Jeff has
absolutely
woken up.
And he sort of said, wait a minute, Armando isn't live, hang on. Oh, he said, is everything pre-recorded? The answer to that, Jeff, is obviously yes. How else would we make it quite so slick as we are this evening? But there we go. It's all part of the fun, isn't it? It's I don't know, is there a solution to this? I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Well, I think the problem is, and I was just this 777 we flew back on from Seattle on what would it have been, Sunday night, back to Heathrow. I mean, it took forever to board the aircraft, and it was just people mucking about. And the trouble is that that I suppose, how much time does it take? It probably takes about 40 minutes to board a fully laden 777, something like that.
Yeah.
And the last 5 minutes, there's still people coming down the jetway. And I don't think, because you're dealing with human beings here, I don't think anyone has got the perfect solution to this, because people behave in different ways. They do. And it obviously can create a massive amount of delay, and ultimately the aircraft could lose their slot time.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you get a bit bigger delays yet still, especially if you're at a busy airport like, say, Heathrow. I mean, where slots are at a premium. Flyer152 in the chat room saying random boarding is the best way. Some guy by the name of Carlos Stebbings, never heard of him, says boarding by the overwing exit. Now that's the way forward. It's a very helpful chip in there by our illustrious leader. Can I trouble you to take take the next story, please, sir?
Yes, by all means. This is a good story because the thing is finally off the ground. I'm pleased to say. So this is the on the simpleflying.com website, and it's all about the Boeing 777X and its second test flight. So on January the 29th, the 777X took off just after 9:30 Seattle time, or just after 17:30 UTC. According to data from Flight Radar 24, the flight was in the air for just under 4 hours and 45 minutes. The flight took off from Boeing Field and headed east as the as the aircraft headed eastwards over Spokane, I think that's pronounced, and into Idaho airspace. The 777X made a few turns and maneuvers. This was likely to allow Boeing to conduct some flight tests on the aircraft. After a few hours in the air, the 777X turned back towards Seattle and landed safely at Boeing Field, so not very far from where I was on Sunday night. For the most of the flight, the 777X maintained an altitude of just over 19,000 feet. This is far lower than what most commercial airplanes fly at for long distances. However, this altitude was likely chosen so that the flight test would not interfere with commercial aircraft operations. Of course, Boeing's 777X has had a few hiccups getting off the ground. Issues with the massive and powerful GE9X engines delayed the first flight of the aircraft. A fun fact for you, the diameter of the GE9X opening is larger than the diameter of the 737 MAX's fuselage.
Oh, wow.
Boeing initially anticipated the first flight to occur in mid-2019. Then Boeing's 777X faced an unexpected event during structural testing. It turns out that during stress testing, the 777X's fuselage ripped apart. This forced Boeing to go back and make some modifications to the 777X. I've got to say that all the stress testing that's done on these aircraft is far in excess of levels that you would ever expect in real life flying, and even in the worst possible turbulence. But again, it did fail, so they need to go back and look at it. But finally, in January of this year, the date for the first flight of the 777-9 came. However, that first flight was delayed by a day due to weather. Then high tailwinds forced the 777X first flight to once again be pushed out. Finally, on Saturday of last week, the Boeing 777-9 made its maiden flight. Now, with this second test flight under Boeing's belt, the aircraft manufacturer has to continue to rigorously test the aircraft. After the 737 MAX crisis, regulators will likely take a longer and harder look at the 777X. Not to mention, Boeing needs to continue to work towards restoring public and industry confidence in its aircraft. The 777X could be the clean start that Boeing needs ahead of several ambitious projects. Airlines now largely expect the 777X to enter passenger service in 2021. Since 2019, both Emirates and Lufthansa have prepared for this delay and are taking it into account when it comes to each other's airlines' respective fleet strategy. Boeing's second 777X test flight went well and bodes well for the aircraft manufacturer. For now, Boeing needs to continue to make progress on the certification for this aircraft ahead of passenger service, and perhaps log a few more orders now that the 777X has made its maiden flight. Well, they could do with a bit of luck, couldn't they? Boeing Aircraft Company right now.
This sounds like an odd question to be asking, and I guess, I don't suppose anybody really knows the answer to this, but has confidence in Boeing really been that badly damaged over the whole MAX thing?
I don't think so. The thing is, when there are new aircraft developments and things going on, there are going to be things that go wrong from time to time. You've got to remember that this aircraft company has been manufacturing some of the very best aircraft in the world for an awfully long time, and they know how to make and get certification for their airplanes. I think that the problem is that the press in particular have just gone full on about the whole MAX thing, and I'm not taking away from the fact that it was there was two very bad accidents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caused hundreds of people to lose their lives. But I think to say that confidence isn't instilled in Boeing isn't right.
No,
I think
absolutely.
Most people would say, "Yep, quite happy to get on a Boeing aircraft at any time."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've only got to look at things like the 747 and that. There's a lot of love for the 747, isn't there? That I don't think will ever wane. Let's be honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next story then. Sticking with simple flying, slightly unusual story this. Qantas suspends the transportation of pugs. There we are. There's a story you didn't think you'd hear today. Pugs and other snub-nosed dogs are temporarily unable to fly on board Qantas after a recent death of a four-legged family member on board the carrier. Due to the genetics, the snub-nosed dogs have trouble breathing on board aircraft and can suffer complications in flight. So what are the details? So flying with dogs can be tricky unless the airline allows the animal to sit in the cabin, such as buying an extra seat or claiming the animal is an emotional support animal. It is generally required to go in the cargo hold. However, conditions in the boarding process, flying and landing, can be rather traumatic for an animal, especially if the animal has trouble breathing. The animals can be left on the hot tarmac and in a cage whilst the aircraft loads its cargo and might even be dehydrated. One such animal that is greatly at risk are breeds of snub-nosed dogs such as pugs, boxers, bulldogs, etc. These dogs are very susceptible to changing air conditions and temperature. Speaking to the Air Cargo News, Qantas's Freight Chief Customer Officer Nick McGlynn said that these types of dogs are hugely popular, but unfortunately they are high-risk flyers due to their respiratory systems and breathing problems. The risk is even higher in hot conditions, and this summer we've seen a tragic spike in deaths of snub-nosed dogs in extreme weather. Unfortunately, Qantas has found out the hard way after an animal died on board when a family was flying to another Australian city. Thus, Qantas has decided to temporarily suspend flying snub-nosed dogs for 2 weeks until it can fully implement new policies. I won't go on. It's sort of, I mean, obviously it's a sort of very sad story, but I mean, surely the solution to this is that they have a facility where they can travel on board. I mean,
yeah,
you know, because the cabin is properly pressurised there, and that I guess this is more of a, because obviously here in the UK, I mean, the transportation of animals is relatively unusual, especially if you're, I guess if you were relocating, but you certainly wouldn't bring someone with you, with your pet with you if you were going on holiday.
No, exactly right. But anyway, that's good to learn about it. So yeah. Is this my story?
It is, yes, absolutely, yes. No, Armando was next one. He's in military mode for the next one. So
good. Yeah. Well, this is on the Reader's Digest.
Oh, quick prize draw, anyone?
I thought they just had that little A5.
Apparently not. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this is all about mid-air humour and 15 hilarious announcements airlines have actually made. I'm not sure they're that hilarious, but let's.
Well, you're the expert. You're the pun expert, sir. So I can't wait to hear your take on this.
No, some of the quality of this leaves a great deal to be desired. It says, this is an example of some of them. Welcome aboard Southwest Flight 245 to Tampa. To operate your seatbelt, insert the metal tab into the buckle and pull tight. It works just like every other seatbelt, and if you don't know how to operate one, you shouldn't be out in public unsupervised.
Oh, that's just a bit rude, isn't it?
Yes. This one is called about crowd control, and this reminds me of my flight back from Seattle where the flight attendant yells out, people, we're not picking out furniture here. Find a seat and get in.
Yeah. That sounds very appropriate to your flight coming home.
Yeah, exactly. Another one is, we'd like to thank you folks for flying with us today. And the next time you get the insane urge to go blasting through the skies in a pressurized metal tube, we hope you'll think of US Airways. Who better to remind you of how crazy what you're doing actually is than the people who do it for a living?
Well, quite, yes.
Another one, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude and we'll be turning down the cabin lights. This is for your comfort and to enhance the appearance of your flight attendants.
Oh, how rude. Although yes, right.
And with regard to emergency evacuation procedures, it says there may be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there are only 4 ways out of this aeroplane. Remember, the closest exit may be behind you, in which case, just slip out the back, Jack.
I mean,
I'm going to have a word with Carlos. This is
Yes.
just so painful, isn't
Yes,
it?
indeed. Go on, give us one more, and then we'll pull the plug on it.
I'm
I
trying to
think
find one that's half good.
vaguely amusing.
Well,
Okay.
here's one then.
Yeah.
Weather at our destination is 50 degrees with some broken clouds, but we'll try to have them fixed before we arrive. Thank you. Remember, nobody loves you or your money more than Southwest Airlines.
I must admit, I quite like that one.
Well, yeah, out of all the ones, it's probably the better of the selection. But
apparently, Micah has chipped in saying there are more than 50 ways to leave your luggage. However, which I think is probably a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, and on that sort of damp squid, that is where we bring the commercial aviation news to a close. Yes, I think we're going to be having a meeting with Carlos, aren't we?
Yes.
Later.
Well, we'll be doing most of the talking.
Yes, absolutely, quite. So the time has come for part 5, sir, of a rather fascinating little chat that you and Captain Nick had.
Yes, indeed. And this is the 5th part of the series of Captain John Hutchison.
There were a lot of industrial troubles that were occurring in your company. Now, this was about the same time that a BEA Trident went down at Staines, and it was famously been discovered that graffiti had been scratched by the first officers on their table that read, "Key, the captain, must die." The inquiry found that considerable friction existed between senior captains and junior pilots, such as you would have been around that time. Now, did you acknowledge this or experience any of this?
Well, first of all, that Trident crash was BEA, not BOAC,
Yeah,
of course.
yes, of course.
And we were separate entities back then. There is no doubt that a lot of the captains I flew with on 707s, who were ex-wartime Bomber Command pilots, were fairly autocratic. And some of them, I have to say, not really up to speed with flying a 4-engine jet aircraft. Having said that, many of them were very capable, so don't get the impression that all these people were sort of slightly incapable ex-piston engine bomber pilots. No,
No, sure.
there was an element of that, but a lot of them were very good. And actually, funnily enough, one of my great regrets is that these guys never talked about their war. Very private. And I wish I'd had the temerity, if you like, as a sort of junior first officer to quiz them about their wartime experiences. There's one chap I flew with, very colourful chap. I did my 747 conversion course with him, and his party trick was to go out over the ocean in a 747 down to about 50 feet, head towards the cliffs of Moher, and heave the aeroplane over the cliffs of Moher. Well, that chap died not so long ago, 5 years or so ago, and there's an obituary to him. He was one of the dam busters.
Oh, good Lord. Isn't that marvellous?
And I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea.
I never.
So, that is a regret I have. I've sidetracked myself completely now. What was the original question?
Well, I was really trying to get at the
Oh yes,
authority gradient.
Papa India, I think, was the...
That was it. It was about the friction and the concern that between the young Handball cadets and these senior old pilots.
Yes, there was some sort of industrial action. I don't think BOAC were involved in this. I think it was BEA that were involved in this particular spurt of industrial action. And there had been some massive row that this captain had in the crew room.
That's right.
Before going onto the flight deck. And he was obviously in a very sort of agitated, disturbed
But partly
state.
because the senior captains were on one side and the junior first officers were on the other side of this dispute.
Well, I don't know who he'd had a row with. Whether it wasn't with I don't think it was with the two first officers that were on that particular flight. I think he had come onto the flight deck, and those two chaps were already present and correct, doing checks and things. But suffice to say that the chap in the right-hand seat, as far as I'm aware, was a very, very junior first officer, and he was being checked out by the more senior one, and this very irate, steamed-up captain arrives and sits in the left-hand seat. And I think, quite frankly, the chap in the right-hand seat, this very junior chap, was terrified of him. And was just anxious beyond all belief to try and do all the right things. And the Trident had a slight flaw in it. I mean, I think any airplane where you can retract the slats without sequencing it with the flaps has a massive design flaw.
Yeah,
So,
which they acknowledged in the end.
Which they acknowledged. So when the order was given to bring the flaps up to whatever the setting was, he went and pulled the slats in instead.
With tragic
and effectively
results.
stalled the airplane.
Yeah, tragic results.
With tragic results.
But you got on well with your captains at this point, or there was the odd one?
They were autocratic, but you know, they were perfectly easy to get on with. You didn't have to. You weren't sort of having rows with them or anything like that. No. I mean, my main criticism was that many of them were very reluctant to give you any flying.
Oh, really?
And I think that probably partly stemmed from the fact that they weren't that confident in flying the 707 themselves, so they weren't quite sure, you know, they weren't too happy to give the flying away.
Interesting. Now, you obviously love flying the 747. Was moving to the VC-10 for your command course a bit of a disappointment?
The 747 was magnificent, yes. As I always describe it, as a gentleman's aerial carriage. It's a most benign and comfortable, splendid airplane. Here it is today, in 2019, still flying.
But I do know that Boeing bet the bank on it. They built this aircraft with about 25 orders from Pan Am, and they needed to sell 400 to save the company, to break even.
Yeah. They
took a real risk,
They
didn't
took
they?
a real risk, and you know, here it is today, still flying. 50 years later, it's a remarkable airplane. So going on to the VC-10, well, the VC-10 was a delightful airplane to fly. So I'd gone from one very nice airplane to fly to another very nice airplane to fly. So, and I could have gone back to the 707 if I'd wanted to.
Okay.
I had the choice, you know, which do you want, Hutchison, 707s or VC-10s? I thought, well, I've never flown a VC-10. Let's have a VC-10. And it was a delightful piece of kit.
Going aside from my script here, what was the command course like in those days?
Quite intense and pressured, yeah. Yes, I can't remember much about it. I think the main thing I remember about it is all the trips I had to do under supervision before I was finally cleared as a captain in my own right. And each one of those under supervision trips was a sort of make or break exercise, potentially. So, you know, you had to be on your toes very much so.
So a tough course.
It was a tough course, yes.
Now, you say that in your book that BOAC had always preferred the 707, but at the time it was a bit oversized and underpowered for many of the old Empire routes. Wasn't it the case that they'd gone to Vickers and specifically asked them to build an aircraft to operate from high, hot airfields, such as Johannesburg? But when they built the VC-10 for them, they kind of reneged on the deal and didn't really want to buy it?
I don't know whether my memory doesn't sort of encompass that, but what I do think certainly happened is that they started sort of trying to change the requirements that they wanted out of the aeroplane, sort of halfway through its sort of design.
Never a good idea.
And it's never a good idea. So it ended up not quite the aeroplane, I guess, that it was supposed to have been.
But it was
that was the whole purpose of it, in the origins of it, was the hot and high airfields in Africa.
So very much overpowered, a beautiful clean wing. I envy you having the opportunity to fly it.
Yes, no, it was a very nice aeroplane to fly.
Oh, I'm really enjoying this series.
Yes, so am I.
How many more parts have we got to look forward to?
Well, I don't know yet, because I've got that's all the ones I've edited so far.
Okay.
Get ahead of the game, but I've got another 2 parts to edit at least, and there may be more. So
Fantastic.
But this is obviously all before John's time on Concorde, and we'll be coming on to that very shortly.
Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be
good enough.
That's the bit I'm most looking forward to. I've got to be honest. It's can't wait to hear all about it. Right, okay, it's time to move on to. He says, frantically pressing all the buttons. It's time to move on to the military. So if you're ready, sir.
So I am. Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, he pressed the wrong button again.
So kicking off the military segment, the Department of Defense has released the names of 2 American airmen who were killed in a crash in Afghanistan this Monday. Officials identified the deceased men as Lieutenant Colonel Paul Voss and Captain Ryan Phaneuf. They were killed during the crash of a Bombardier E-11 aircraft in Afghanistan's Ghazni province, which is an area controlled by the Taliban. The cause of the crash is not yet known, but officials have said there's no indication that it was caused by enemy fire. Voss from Guam was assigned to Headquarters Air Combat Command in Joint Base Langley, Eustis, Virginia. He was on a voluntary deployment to Afghanistan when the crash occurred. It is really hard to describe how sad we are at the loss of 2 great airmen. Lieutenant Colonel Voss was our brother and our teammate, said General Mike Holmes, the commander of Air Combat Command, in a statement to Newsweek. The men and women of our Air Force knowingly put themselves in harm's way, and I'm thankful for great Americans like them. Our thoughts and prayers are with their family members and our fellow airmen during this difficult time. The other gentleman was from Hudson, New Hampshire. He was assigned to the 37th Bomb Squadron at Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. His leadership says, our hearts are heavy to learn of the tragic loss of Captain Ryan Phaneuf of Hudson, New Hampshire in Afghanistan. My deepest condolences with his family, friends, and fellow airmen. I join a grateful nation in honoring the life and service of this brave American who made the ultimate sacrifice. So this plane was part of a small specialized fleet of aircraft used for an Air Force program called the Battlefield Airborne Communications Node, or BACON, which provides real-time information to battlefield areas by relaying data. It was based out of Kandahar, about 170 miles from the crash site, and was part of the 430th Expeditionary Electronic Combat Squadron. Shortly before the crash, the plane is said to have sent out a mayday call while cruising at 42,000 feet. The reason for the crash is unknown, but officials had previously told one news outlet that the working theory involves a fuel system problem of course, a full investigation into the cause is underway. The officials also confirmed that the Navy SEALs recovered the remains of the 2 men from the crash site, along with the flight data recorder. The aircraft was destroyed after the recovery, according to standard military practice. The remains were found near the crash site, treated with dignity and respect by the local Afghan community, and in accordance with their culture, said U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Initially, the Taliban had claimed responsibility for downing the airplane, saying that everyone on it, including high-ranking intelligence officials. However, the U.S. officials dispute this claim, and the group has been known to make questionable or exaggerated claims. Officials have been recently negotiating with the Taliban in hopes of coming to a peace agreement.
And I mean, again, it's a week for sad stories, really, isn't it?
I was just thinking the same thing, actually. We've covered so many tragic accidents, haven't we, this week, of varying types. And, a
bad week, I think, for aviation, I think, is fair to say. As I say, obviously, our thoughts go out to everyone involved in all that, sort of families, friends, etc. It's awful, isn't it? Really, it is awful.
Absolutely.
We'll move on then, if we may, sir. And
So
the next one is with you.
Yeah, it's on the defenceconnect.com.au, and it says that the RAAF welcomes the first PC-21 trainer aircraft. Taking train to new heights, Air Force Number 4 Squadron, based at the RAAF base Williamtown, has welcomed its first Pilatus PC-21 aircraft to their new home. Regarded as the world's most advanced pilot training aircraft, the PC-21's arrival on Friday, the 24th of January at 4 Squadron demonstrated the platform's training versatility, with the aircraft being engaged and immersed in a different but highly significant training role. Commanding officer of Number 4 Squadron, Wing Commander Sean Jobson, said that the PC-21 replaces the recently retired PC-9A and will contribute to vital squadron training activities. The PC-21 will assist in preparing the next generation of joint terminal attack controllers, supporting forward air control and air surface integration across a broad spectrum of operations, Wing Commander Jobson says. Air Force is currently transitioning to the PC-21 trainer as part of the most significant technological upgrade in the Air Force's 98-year history. Number 4 Squadron has a joint service responsibility for guiding and training the development of JTACs. The arrival of the new aircraft will ensure personnel have the opportunity to continue to execute kinetic effects in real-time scenarios, explained Wing Commander Johnson. JTAC training includes the ability to plan, brief, control, and report on aircraft to provide close air support in the battlefield. The PC-21 will ensure that Number 4 Squadron continues to deliver the high standards of mission training, so JTAC personnel are and continue to remain combat ready, Wing Commander Johnson said. Excuse me. The first 3 Number 4 PC-21 aircraft ferried from RAAF base East Sale in Victoria, with remaining Number 4 Squadron aircraft expected to arrive at RAAF base Williamtown in February 2020. The Pilatus PC-21 is the world's most advanced pilot training aircraft. As part of the AIR 5428 pilot training system project, the PC-21 will replace the Air Force's current PC-9A. It'll be based at the East Sale in Victoria and the RAF base Pearce in Western Australia. I don't know why they've repeated that paragraph, but that's...
Do you know, they do that a lot, don't they?
That's the internet for you, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It's one of those irritating habits that they've all got into, isn't it? Where you read the headline and then the first paragraph is essentially repeating the headline. But I guess that's the joys of dumbing down the news, everyone. Anyway, on that bombshell, we'll move on to the next story. This is on the Defense News, defensenews.com website, and the headline is US Defense Department launches Gremlins drone from a mothership for the very first time. So this is out of Washington. The US Defense Department is one step closer to having swarming drones that it can launch from military planes and recover in mid-air, having successfully conducted the first flight of the Gremlins aircraft back in November. The test, which occurred at Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, proved that a C-130A could successfully launch an X-61A Gremlins air vehicle, said Tim Keeter, who manages the program for Dynetics. The company won the Gremlins contract from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency back in 2018. It gives us a lot of confidence going forward that this vehicle can fly where it's supposed to fly, how it's supposed to fly. Keeter said during a January 21st phone call with the reporters. Now the team can be principally focused on the other portion of our program plan, which is to successfully rendezvous with a C-130, dock with our docking system, and safely recover the vehicle. During the test, which lasted 1 hour and 41 minutes, the X-61A flew with no anomalies, and the DARPA Dynetics team completed all test objectives, including transitioning the X-61A from a cold engine start to stable flight, validating the Gremlins data links and handing off control of the drone between air and ground control stations, deploying the docking arm and collecting data from the air vehicle. However, during the recovery process, the drone crashed to the ground and was destroyed. The drogue parachute, which deployed first to slow the air vehicle, functioned as planned, Keeter explained. However, the larger main parachute, which would soften the landing of the air vehicle so that the drone could be reused, did not correctly deploy due to a mechanical issue. Dynetics has built 4 other Gremlin vehicles, leaving enough drones to accomplish the program's primary requirement to fly and recover 4 Gremlins in 30 minutes, said Scott, who is the DARPA's Gremlins program manager. It seems strangely ironic that a project called Gremlin might have had a Gremlin with its parachute, but the irony is not lost on me. The next demonstration, set for sometime this spring, will verify whether the Gremlins can be successfully recovered by the C-130 whilst in flight. This was characterised that the test was as critical for proving that the Gremlin can be reused over multiple missions, a key point for bearing out the cost effectiveness of the concept. If I had an expendable vehicle, at some point, I'm not going to want to be able to use those things because they're just too expensive, he said. But if I can recover them and then amortize the cost of that vehicle over 10 or say 20 or even 30 sorties, maybe there's a bend in the curve somewhere that really will allow us to benefit from these smaller, more affordable, attributable systems. During the recovery process, the C-130 will lower a towed capture device that will mate with the Gremlins drone, thus avoiding the turbulence generated by the wake of a larger aircraft. Keeter has said once the drone is stabilised by the capture device, an engagement arm deploys, docking the X-61A and bringing inside the C-130 cargo bay to be stowed. I mean, this does seem it seems like a very sort of recyclable friendly sort of way of reusing reconnaissance drones and stuff, doesn't it?
Have you noticed as well how difficult it is to read military stories?
Military stories, yes, absolutely.
It's the way, I know there's lots of acronyms that perhaps we're not always used to, but do they make it deliberately difficult to read, do you think?
I think they make it so that only people like Armando can actually understand it. I think that's what it is. But we're very lucky because we do have an Armando who can translate everything for us. It's... I mean, I love stuff like this. I mean, as I say, I'm not sure Gremlins is necessarily the correct term for a device like this because it conjures up all sorts of mogwais and late night feeding in the world of Matt, but that's just because I'm a bit of a film buff. But it's great. I mean, I think this is the future. I mean, the times are disappearing where warfare involves humans in any way. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. So next up then. You remember that Carlos and I went to the Dubai Airshow, and behind me here is a lovely shot that we took as we climbed up the tower, literally climbed up the tower on a very rickety ladder. And again, as you probably have seen and heard, we've had some fantastic access to the people and the aircraft there. This is the last interview in this series that we did when Carlos and I went on to the Etihad Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
So I've been lucky enough indeed to come on board Etihad's Dreamliner, and I'm here with
Abdullah Al-Shahi. I'm first officer with Etihad Airways since 2010, and I was on 330 and 320, and now I'm flying the 787 Dreamliner, which is the future aircraft of this war.
So Abdullah, how many different aircraft types have you flown in your time?
Actually 3, but Airbus you can say 319, 320, 321 and 330, and this one now 787-9-10.
And your favourite between them?
Actually I like the automation in Airbus, but you know 787 is very smart. All the screens are here. We couldn't find it in Airbus, so now I can say the 78 is my best aircraft now, and it's lovely environment when you're cruising at high altitude, better than other aircraft.
So for you, Abdullah, where did your flying start? Was it PPL, or your private pilot license?
Yeah, I started with the Ethihad, the cadet program with the Ethihad, from the PPL up to the ATPL, and we have this course, the university degree that we have to take it to be a pilot with the Ethihad. So basically I have the ATPL license and bachelor degree in aviation science.
Wow, how long did that take?
Actually 5 years, I can say 5 years, yeah.
Brilliant. And the whole, was it fun? Because in the UK it costs a lot of money to learn to fly. How is it expensive to learn to fly in UAE?
Actually here the company, they give us salary and they cover everything from zero to until we end flying, yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's really good, yeah.
Many countries do that.
And obviously the flying, you've got the weather here, the good weather in the UAE, which is great for learning to fly. But obviously...
Actually, not really. No, it's not really good weather. We fly in a lane, we train on a lane, which is, you know, it's a desert, it's bumpy, and sometimes it's very hot, so we cannot fly either. If the temperature reaches like more than 40, we cannot fly. So a lot of time we cancel our flight because of that.
So what aircraft did you learn to fly in?
Cessna 172 and Diamond A42.
And obviously the Cessna 172, a great training aircraft.
Beautiful.
And you enjoyed flying?
Of course, yeah.
And can you still remember your first solo flight?
For sure.
Was it good?
It's very nice. Yeah. It's an amazing feeling when you take the aircraft from the parking to take off and land again.
Oh, fantastic. It must be so great, a great feeling to go from a 172 to flying.
Exactly, which actually I don't, when I was cadet, I don't know when I will become like a real pilot in this aircraft, but the time is fast moving and here I am now.
And I think for children as well, for young children, it's great, you know, with people, especially with families, if you've got families that, you know, mothers and fathers who learn to fly, it's great.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Yeah, they can do it. They can start with the Microsoft simulator and then they can jump here.
You've used that?
Actually, no.
No?
No.
So one of the things a lot of pilots say to us is that they don't like the sim, when they're going in the sim training. Is it something you enjoy, or the sim training?
Not really, no. No, because you know the sim is test for you. You learn, but it is a test by the end of the sim, you know. You grade for that, and but sometimes it's fun when you do a lot of things which you cannot do in the real aircraft.
So with Etihad, you're sitting right seat. How long is it now until you can go into the left seat, Captain?
I can say 3 years when I get my hours. Now I have like 2,700 hours, so it's still more like 2,500 hours, and then I can jump on the left seat.
Wow, and is that a big conversion? Do you have to have a lot of training to move into this seat?
Yeah, you have to do a lot of courses and training in the simulator. Yeah, it's not easy jump from the right to left seat, but while I do it from the cadet to here, so I can do it from right to left seat.
So you definitely want to sit here
For sure,
in the future?
Yeah.
It's great to tell all the friends, I expect. Yeah. So what's the future? You're going to stay with Etihad and move to the left seat, hopefully in the future?
Yeah, and if I can get like 2 jobs with Ethihad, like management and flying, which will be great. Yeah.
So would you fancy flying the 380?
No, never. I didn't fly it, no.
But you would you like
If
to have
they ask me to fly it before 78, I will choose the 380.
But you like the Dreamliner more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's easier conversion it's not easy for me when I convert from Airbus to 78. It's totally different aircraft.
It's a question for you. With the Airbus and Boeing, obviously with the Boeing you've got the control yoke, and with the Airbus you've got the side stick. What do you prefer? What's your preference? Side stick or?
This one you can feel it more when you fly it, like you are flying it. But that one, you just, it's a little bit of touching and that's it. So you, like Boeing guys before, they laugh on us. You are not really pilot. So now I'm really pilot.
Given that choice between the Boeing and Airbus, you prefer the Boeing?
Yeah. It's I told you, it's the future aircraft. If I have to choose, maybe I will choose the 350 instead of 78 because I have the Airbus license already, so it will be easier to me to convert from one type to other type.
On the flight deck, you've got the head-up displays.
Yeah.
How easy are they to use? Are they a very good tool to use flying?
It's very good, but sometimes it's annoying, especially at night, because you cannot see the aircraft in front of you. It's a green light, so you cannot see really well. But it's a good tool, especially in low visibility. It's very helpful.
Very helpful.
Yeah,
okay,
we can. Yeah.
So before we finish, one last question for you.
Sure.
We ask all the pilots on the show. If you were given the chance to go outside now and fly any aircraft, military, civilian airliner, any aircraft, to go outside now and fly yourself, what would that aircraft be?
Commercial.
Commercial aircraft?
Commercial.
What type of aircraft? Any aircraft you could fly, retired or still
maybe
flying?
Jet aircraft is very fun because they climb very high and the speed is very high as well. Maybe jet aircraft, like the business jet aircraft.
A business jet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you.
And
so
I know
much.
the listeners will love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All the best for the future.
Thanks.
Do you know what? When I'm watching stuff like that, I sit there and I feel really bad. And do you know why? Because that man's English was absolutely incredible. And you just think, me as a very lazy Englishman who has he can barely speak English himself, and that man in essentially probably a second or maybe even third language is having this really complicated conversation about the Boeing 787 and his love of flying, and you just think, it's terrible, really, isn't it? We should be ashamed of ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, but no, it was good, and so that concludes our coverage from the Dubai Airshow 2019. We had a great time there. And the weather was just nice as well. And just as we left, it all closed in and got very wet. And
You talk about get your timing right, didn't you?
So, yes, looking forward to more air show coverage during this year. We've got some things lined up. I think we need one of those production meetings. Don't we?
We do, absolutely. We're hopefully in the next week or so we'll sit down and have a bit of a chat about it. Because I want to get a summer meetup planned as well. That's the thing. So when you sit down and have a bit of a chat, if you'd like to interact with the show, you can do in many ways. The website is www.planetalkinguk.com. On there are all the details about us, bios from all of the people involved in the show. Also, there is a contact form on there. You can send us a quick email. You can do it by conventional methods using podcast@planetalkinguk.com. You can search us on social media using the handle Plane Talking UK, or why not be very fancy, send us a voice memo via WhatsApp. It's +44 757 22 491 66. That's +44 757 22 491 66.
Nice. Bit of flying for me coming up.
Oh, yes.
This next
You've got
week.
quite a busy week, haven't you, actually? You've got lots of little flights in the calendar.
Yes. What are we doing? Monday, Newcastle and back in a day from Heathrow. That's a really expensive flight. There's only, I think, 3 flights a day, or maybe 4. No, I think it is 3 flights a day. And because it's only BA that operate from Heathrow to Newcastle, so they can charge what they like for it.
Well, yeah, pretty much. What's the aircraft?
A319.
Oh, okay. So it's quite big then, to be fair. It's not...
148 seats or whatever it is. So, yeah. And then Wednesday, I'm flying to our European head office in Belgium. So I fly into Brussels and get the train down to Antwerp for that. Then back on Friday. And then Sunday, off to Schiphol for a week for our big AV show thingy that we do. Make sure we take our masks with us and our sanitizers.
Of course, yes, absolutely.
And all the rest of it.
Actually, all jokes aside, this coronavirus, or what is it? Coronavirus? Am I saying that right? Sorry, it just reminds me of beer. I've just got a lager popped into my head there. I mean, genuinely, I mean, stuff like this must be a bit of a concern for companies like that put on these sort of shows. There's big shows on all the time. There's automotive shows on. There's our show that we've got over at the RAAF in Amsterdam. So that's what is it, 75, 80,000 people, something like that. And a lot of people from China, especially Shenzhen, which is where the LED technology is coming from. I've got to say, from what I've heard and seen so far, I think the Chinese have done a very good job of trying to contain all of this. And although there are some incidents around the world and a couple in the UK, I noticed today, but I think they've done a pretty good job so far. But this is an ongoing story, and obviously with the WHO involved now, everybody's keeping a close eye on what the guidelines are. And of course, this is a big story, mainly because obviously we do live in a world now where people literally jet set from one end of the world to another almost daily. So I mean, I guess with that does inherently come massive risks with a virus like this.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think it's very difficult to, and I'm not being a medically qualified person at all, but obviously this sort of thing comes out of the blue, and although you can prepare for it in terms of the local care that you can give patients and that kind of thing, there are a lot of countries that just don't have that capability. So
don't have the resources, essentially. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but anyway, we'll see how this develops. But it will obviously affect flights to and from China. And certainly all the major airlines are reducing or cancelling flights.
BA have cancelled from Heathrow, haven't they? They've got nothing going into or coming out of. But, try and stay safe if you can, Nev. I mean,
I take vitamin D before I go and take me Lemsip.
Now you're going to be, because of that and work commitments, you're actually going to be missing for the next couple of Fridays, aren't you?
I know, a tragedy for everybody, I realise.
Tragedy for me.
Well, I don't know. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be busy with my editing stuff this weekend, so I should give you another 2 episodes of John Hutchison to shove in the mix.
Fantastic.
And any other bits of video I can come up with as well.
Well, you will be sorely missed, my friend, but safe travels. Nothing exciting in the world of Matt, really. I've got in fact, actually, I will be missing at the end of February. I've got a nice little surprise trip to Glasgow that I found out about this week, so very much looking forward to that. One person did suggest to me that maybe stab vests were required, but I think that's a little unfair. So I've never actually...
That's just on the train, let alone when you...
Well, yeah, there is that. I've never actually... I've been to Edinburgh and I've been to Aberdeen, but I must admit Glasgow is new on me, because that's actually, weirdly for us, that's the nearest sort of like major point, if you like, because it's at the bottom of Scotland, isn't it, for want of a better word. So very much looking forward to that. That's going to be fun.
If you get the chance to do some exploring, Glasgow is a very nice place now. They've done a great job with it, actually.
Well, hopefully we've got the best part of an afternoon and an evening to do a little bit of exploring. So it's going to be fun, and also a bit of first-class train travel. I'm really rather excited. I know, absolutely. Is there an equivalent to seat 1A on the train? I don't know.
Not really, no.
No,
but,
okay.
I'll tell you what, you won't go hungry when you get there either. But just don't forget your deep fried Mars bar as well.
Ooh, do you know, I've never had one. I desperately want one. Anyway, enough of this. Suddenly, the podcast has turned into a food show all of a sudden. So I think that's where we really need to bring things to a close. Thank you very much, as always. Nev, it's been a pleasure. Armando, thank you very much for taking the time to record us the stories. It's been a huge help. It's nice to sort of have him involved, at least, isn't it? With him on tape. I know I shouldn't really say that, should I? I don't know. What do we call it now? It's all digital. It doesn't seem the same somehow, does it?
Yes, it doesn't sound so good, does it, when we say it's on the SSD drive or it's on the hard disk.
Loses a bit of thing. Oh dear, the chat room is busy telling us off now. Dr. Steph is very unimpressed. She said deep fried foods come to the NC State Fair. Oh right. Ooh,
North Carolina. Yes, that's right. I've heard of some very unhealthy food there.
Excellent.
But, obviously. The APG team are very good at sampling that.
Well, quite right, absolutely. Well, and obviously we bow to their superior knowledge when it comes to fine and healthy deep-fried goods. Anyway, on that bombshell, it is time to end. Thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening. Nev, have a good couple of weeks. Everyone else, I'll catch you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.